Well, hey there, everybody. This is Justin Dyke from CartoonSmart.com, and I welcome you to the first of probably three lessons on creating a role-playing game with SpriteKit. This first one is going to be entirely focused on creating a hero character and a kind of a hero trail of characters inside of a little world, and of course that's what I'm walking around in right here. If I run into the border, I will lose a little bit of health, and later on what we'll do is in a future lesson we'll populate this entire world with all sorts of coins and pitfalls, whatever it is, doors, things like that. But for right now, when we're just working with our hero, I've gotten us as far as basically just a basic boundary and some background art there. And believe me, there's enough to teach just with creating this little setup with damageable and attackable heroes. You can see I can touch and it will attack. Some other little options you can put in here are to rotate, and that will kind of bring your characters back into a formation or a line, or kind of regroup them. Another thing you can do is switch out leaders. So if you double tap, that will now make this little green blobby guy into the leader, and you can see he's kind of the one centered now, and these guys are following around. And you can also triple tap, and that would make the third character in the line be the leader. But in the simulator here, I only have the option to double tap. So at least I don't think there's a triple tap up here in the menu. So anyway, that is that's kind of the bare bones of what is going on here. But I'm going to show you guys lots of little options you can set with a property list to change the character art. If they have physics bodies, and they do have physics bodies, it's we're walking around inside of a physics-based world. It just doesn't have the gravity set on, so nobody is kind of sinking to the bottom. But that is something that you could add, and don't feel limited to this just being a role-playing game. This could be a marble game, and each one of these could just be marbles, and they bounce around and they try to land in a hole or something like that. So I just chose a role-playing game because, well, I was a big fan of Phantasy Star. I wasn't a Zelda guy, I was a Phantasy Star guy because I had the Genesis and Sega as a kid, so we're going to kind of go with that. And I should note that the frame rate for this in the simulator is about 30 frames per second, but as soon as you get this onto your device, it's going to be at 60 frames per second. And I test with a iPhone 4S and a iPad 2 and 3, and I'm consistently getting about 60 frames per second most of the time. A little bit of the time it'll dip down to like 59 or something like that. So it runs quite smooth. So let's talk a little bit about the property list, and we'll probably publish this again to show you some changes. But let me go find our Xcode project. Okay, so you can set just about anything from inside of the property list here, but I don't want you guys to think of this as a starter kit, because I do want to teach everything inside of here and give you guys the kind of full know-how of how to change everything. But essentially, when everything is said and done, this whole project could kind of be like a property list. So again, we're just going to be dealing with heroes in this series of lessons, and we'll move on to enemies and then the level map later on. But I have, of course, gone in here and put in like the background. You can shrink the background border by 0.9%. So if I were to set this to yes and republish this, you would actually see the border that is kind of keeping these characters in. So let me walk over there. So there you go. That's that green indicates the border. And in fact, if you go over here to characters, what you can do is set that for all of them as well. I'll just do one of them real quick. And achievements, this is something I was thinking about for later on. You could do that in Game Center. Foreground, there's no foreground art, but you could put like an extra layer on top of everything. And then coins to level up. These are just things that I was kind of loosely planning out later, so obviously there's no coins in here right now. So and anyway, back to the published version. So there's the boundary that is making up, or the physics border that's making up this character right here. So let's keep going on. Follow delay. Just briefly, I'll go through kind of these main properties. It's 0.25, so it takes them about a quarter of a second for anybody that is walking around behind this guy to react to a change in direction and things like that. You can lessen that, and you can also just entirely disable this by going over here and saying use follow delay equals no. And if you set that, I didn't save that, so it might not have registered it. Let's find out. But if you set that to no, then it's they kind of immediately loop around like that. And let's go pick up one more character so it's obvious. There you go. I like the follow delay in there. I think it's a little bit more realistic. So we're gonna just keep that as yes. And let's take a look at our characters. So obviously we have 3 of them on the board right here, or we did, and each one of them is kind of swappable with the next. You don't have to specify anybody as the particular leader, although whatever the first item in here is, that's going to be your leader, obviously. Otherwise, not otherwise, I could just drag these up and down to kind of change the order of them at any time. They're just identical. And let's go through them. What I'm getting at is we only need to talk about one of these in here, I guess. So your base frame, this always gets drawn from the image.assets folder over here, or the XC assets folder, and this would be your base image right here, your character. In the blob's case, it's obviously this blob one over here. So again, character, you don't have to put in character.png or anything like that. Just put in the name that you have set right here. And because it is a universal app, we just have our standard definition one and our HD one over here. And then the any other frames that you're going to include for this character, and all of them are optional. If you have walking frames, side view frames, attack frames, they should all be the same size as this main base image right here. Okay, otherwise you get into kind of sizing issues where they kind of go up and down. You want them all to have that same exact size. And start location, this is an obvious one, 0, 0, so our character was just right in the middle there. Let's build this again. And then for some of the other ones, obviously they were offset from that. So negative 300, 300, that would be like 300 up and 300 over here, negative from that. And let's go back to the first character. Use for collisions. Any one of your characters can, anybody that's following the leader can optionally use collisions. The leader always needs to have some sort of physics body around him. But if you set this to no, that means that if that character was not in the lead, then they don't have a physics border around them, and they're not going to necessarily collide with things. But I think in general you're probably going to want to keep that to yes. And then collision body type, this can be a circle or a square, and you can also change the collision body covers what percentage. So right now 1 is 100%, but if I put this down to 0.5 and I were to publish this again with debug body set to yes, which it is, you would see that there you go. So it's a square shape, but it's only covering about half of the character. I prefer that at using a circle. So we'll put that back, circle. And then your frames per second. You might just assume, hey, I want that to be 60 frames per second because that's how fast I want it to run. But that's not necessarily the case. The frame rate of the app is separate from this FPS right here. This basically just sets how quickly your animated frames run through. Okay, and just depending on how many you have. For example, I've got, for most of my sequences here, like the walking sequences, I've got about 8 frames, and I think setting them down a little bit from 60 frames per second makes for a more realistic walk. Okay, in some sense I'm kind of dropping every 2 frames to make it I mean, an 8-frame walk cycle is really fast, but if I had, let's say, 30 frames, if I felt like drawing out all that many, then maybe I'd want to run through the animation at 60 frames per second or a bit quicker. So that's why I set that, and you can just toggle it. And then use resting frames. So for every one of these kind of arrays full of frames, you can use them. You can optionally set them or not set them. And I kind of assume that was set to yes, because I do have resting frames. So you might be able to see right here. Wait, watch this. So if I stop these guys, he's got a resting frame sequence, whereas I had this one set to no. Okay, so that's the difference. And again, you just put all these inside of here into your resting frames array, and you can even use the same frame over again. So you can see that I've got frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. Those kind of make the character breathe up. And then to make the character breathe back down, you can just repeat back some of those same frames that you had before, and they'll be in a loop like that. And then you set the atlas file. Okay, resting atlas file is set to still, and that is this folder right here. And these are just, when you create these, they're just folders with .atlas at the end, and you just kind of dump them into your project, which we'll talk about in the tutorial. And here are the actual frames for the character resting. So let's keep, and actually I was going to say let's keep going through here, but all of these function the same exact way. So you just basically decide, do I want to use them, use front view frames, use side view frames, use back view frames. All of them have a corresponding atlas file. They could be in the same atlas file, but because I had kind of a lot of these, I just started dividing them up into different atlas files right here. And I'm pretty sure the way that Xcode handles this is that if you have too many frames to fit into one image file, because that's what happens with these are basically just sprite sheets, and it'll combine the images together and kind of optimize them into one image file and load only that. I believe if you have too many images to fit into one giant image, Xcode will behind the scenes figure out what to do. But you know, in all these cases, it's just this image, this image, this image, just your standard and your lower definition ones. You do have to name them at 2x for the HD ones. Okay. So going back over here, I just want to remind you one more time, you don't have to put in the .png or the @2x for any of these. You just put in that base name, and it'll figure out what to do. All right, so we get to scroll down a little bit. All right, does attack when not the leader. All right, so does the character attack when he's not the leader? I set that to be no. You can set that to yes until we have actually something in here to attack. It really doesn't matter too much, but you can see that you know, if you click down, it'll make that little attack animation. And front attack atlas. So again, if you want to make a separate animation for attacking, you set that to yes. You specify the atlas file, put in the frames, and there you go. Same thing for side attack, back attack, and then and the back one is just when he's moving up. I say back, but it's because there's a back view there, right? And all right, so use attack particles if you want to include a particle sequence in there, and you can see that I did actually have a particle sequence in all of mine. Then you put that to be yes. Then you specify the attack particle file, and in that case it's Spark. You don't have to put .sks afterwards. So you go over here, and here is that Spark, and these are all created within Xcode. So you go over here if you need to make a new one, file, new file. I know that's getting cut off a little bit, and then you go over to resource, it's SpriteKit particle file, and let's just name it anything, doesn't matter. And there you go. So now you've got my particle.sks. And if you ever want to just toggle around the settings on that, you go over here. And of course, we'll talk about all this again later on. But I just wanted to demo how quickly it is, how quick and easy it is to create these. And then particles to emit. I put this to a relatively low number so that there's only 15 of them, that 15 of those particles that get created. And you can actually see the node count go up to see, it goes up to 24. And then dips back down. And then particle delay, that's if I set that to 1, it would be 1 second. So after you attack, the particles would appear 1 second later. And I set that in there because when they appeared right away, it just seemed like a little bit too quick. And then you can set has own health to yes or no. So the following characters would either not have health their health bars set above them, and as you can see, I do have the those set in there. And then oh, you know what? I was like, why is this guy suddenly the leader? And it's because I was running around these guys so much that they both, I guess this guy here, wait, the leader died, and then he just became the leader over there. There we go, get him back. All right, so then health, this is kind of an arbitrary number right here. It's set to 100, and I think that's a good number, to like a good base number in there, but it really doesn't matter what you set it at. You can put that at 1,000, but just keep in mind that for things like this, level border causes damage by 25. So right now, if you run into the wall 4 times, you die. If you'd set your health to 1,000, then realistically, the border doesn't really kill you, you know. You're not going to run into it, 40 times probably. It does damage, and this is set to yes. And again, this is going to be something that we play with when we actually have enemies to attack, things like that. And then following enabled, so this is set to no or yes. And for the leader, it doesn't matter. So whoever is the first one in the list here, doesn't matter if it's set to yes or no, but for any other characters in here, if you set this to no, that means that they're going to just show up kind of waiting to be collided with and touched, basically tapped into the game. Whereas if you'd set that to yes, they're immediately going to be following the character around. And then that is that's about it. So we've got, believe me, we've got plenty to talk about in this initial series of series of lessons. We're gonna break this up into what will hopefully be about 10 to 20 minute lessons, covering everything that I've just talked about setting up here. And I hope you enjoy it, because there's gonna be a lot more to talk about down the road, and in the end, we're gonna have an awesome project.